So welcome back to the Archaboat Shop. My name's Rod. Still working on the Acorn skiff here. This is the second half of the portion of putting the Skeg keel and outer stem on. So let's get to it. Now I'm just going to clean up this edge on my workbench here with my block plane. Hold it down with my holdfast. So what I need to know for sure is what is square across here, so I can make sure I get a nice flat surface through the edge. I'll just take this over to the bandsaw and cut the underside of the outside stem and clean up and shave until it mates up with the outside bevel on the keel. So with that bevel cut, we are very close to having this sit in the proper position. It's just got to go down here, so I got to shave off a little bit of the planking that's overhanging or sticking up a little bit. Just seems to be a little bit high or proud in this area here. I have to shape some of that down. This is going to be a back and forth to make sure that we get to the point that this is going to mate up to the inside stem and the keel. So that's where it's supposed to sit. Now it's just shaving down any part of the inside stem outside profile here. Feel a bit high here, so we've got it's been raised here, showing gaps elsewhere. Of course, in a perfect world, since we made the inside stem and outside stem together, these would mate up perfectly and beautifully. But we're building a boat here, which means it is not a perfect world as far as, you know, every piece just mating up perfectly. I really do need to, that's where it should sit right there. So I need to be able to get it down a bit. I want to just mark sort of, you know, so I can keep putting it back in the same place. I'm just going to make a mark there, erase some of these other lines that are all over the place. I'm too confused. So we're close, very close. Just have a bit of a gap underneath the scarf area here, and I can clean that. I can get that by shaving this down a bit more. Now that the skeg, the two pieces of the keel and the outer stem are ready to install, and I've dry fitted everything, I'm happy with everything, I'm going to put on a couple of coats of varnish. I'm using this water-based sea gold varnish here, which means I can slap on 2 or 3 coats here today before putting bedding compound in between the seams and installing tomorrow. I do like using this sea gold as a sort of a sealer coat because water thin, it really absorbs into the wood nicely without having to thin it down. So we're going to do it on all the surfaces of the pieces going in and on the boat itself. Before I permanently install this onto the bow of the Acorn Dinghy, I'm going to try and get rid of some of this epoxy. It's kind of just all the squeeze out, and the best way to do that is edge with the heat gun. It'd be very hard on the edge tools. I wouldn't want to take my power plane or my bench plane to it. But if we just heat this up, it's just going to peel right off of there. This was the edge that was face down on the table when I laminated up around the form. And I had the wax paper underneath it, so it kind of is a smooth surface, but there's certainly some squeeze out here and there that is easy to remove with heat. Now the inside dimension of this is just a hair over what the thickness that's necessary to fit on the inside stem that's accommodated for the extra thickness of the planking. So we will be beveling this down to more of a point on the outside, so I just need to give this a bit of a clean up. But I'm not going to touch any of this area here, so I don't want, at this point, I do not want to be touching any of this here. I'm just going to put a black felt marker on here, and I cannot take that line off. In hindsight, probably would have been better to make this an extra 1/4 of an inch thicker to accommodate for any discrepancies in the thickness of the planking, or the angles, in which it comes in, the planking comes into the end, the shaping of the stem, so on and so forth. Because I've used cedar planking as opposed to glue lap ply with marine plywood, my planking is a little bit thicker than what would be there, so, but this is going to work, as long as we don't get too crazy, carried away with shaping this any thinner on the backside edge. It is time to mount the keel, the skeg, and I'll work on the forward stem later today. So what I've done is I have obviously dry fitted all of these pieces in here. Screws are done, they're into the wood, and then I put it in place. Then I masked it off because I'm going to put some bedding compound in here, and I really just don't want it everywhere because I'm pretty good at that. Getting bedding compound absolutely everywhere. So it is now time. I am using boat caulk, mahogany color, so kind of blend in whatever tends to stick out here and there. I'm using a number 10 1.5" screw up through the keelson into the keel. Doesn't appear that I got as much squeeze out as I was expecting, so I'm just going to add a small bead into the corner here. And I just made a little chisel stick here so I can clean up in there. Just going to press that hard into there, get it down into any gaps and cracks. Alright, skeg goes on first. This way I can actually lay this down here and find the old holes. The rest of the screws go in from the underside. So before I pull the tape, I'm just going to kind of clean up this edge. I pull the tape off, I'll have this stuff maybe everywhere. Now there's still a bit of shaping I need to do to this, but I'm going to do that while it's on. In other words, there's a bit of a taper to the bottom here because there will be a brass stem band or a brass strip along the bottom. All right, we need to get this tape off as it's already starting to sort of gel over. And I don't want to be pulling all of the filler out. We'll pull the tape off. After a lot of back and forth to the bench, to the boat, to the bench, to the boat, shaping, I've got the stem to fit nice and tightly against the inside stem. I have it clamped on using the overhang down here at the breast hook area. And these long clamps are kind of holding it on center with one on the other side. Now what I'm going to be doing is I'm actually going to be bolting with some silicone bronze carriage bolts right through the outside stem, through the inside stem to hold it in place, because I'm not gluing it on, and I'm not confident that just having some screws through there is going to be strong enough. So I've got it nicely where I want it to be. I can just tap it. It needs to go up. And get it nice and centered on the back edge there. It's not shaped all the way, but we can do that a little bit later when it's on the boat, or I can take it off and move it around a bit as well. So we just want to make sure that that back edge is on center all the way down, so it's not overhanging one side and shallow on the other side, because then I'd have to actually shape down the planking, which I can't do, to smooth the inside or the outside stem into the hull of the boat. Now to just mark out where could actually put some bolts. Now I'm actually going to put a bolt through here. I'll have a little bit of overhang here to put a painter's line through if I wish, or a hole through here for a painter's line. And we need to put a breast hook in there, which is going to take up, let's say 1.5 inches of that space inside there. So I don't need a bolt in behind where I can't get the breast hook right up to butt up against to the inside stem. So I'm going to map out how many bolts I need and about what spacing. If I put the first one at 2 inches above the shear line, somewhere in there, just use my square here to get that sort of around to the front face. So we're talking first bolt about there. Now what's going to be adequate to hold this in place? I mean, it's a pretty stiff structure here, so I would think every at least maybe, minimum 6 inches, and I just want to sort of do a dry run to see where I end up here. I don't want to have every 6 inches and the last one being 2 inches apart. So we'll figure this out and as I go here, and just to see where we end up on the top here or the bottom of the boat. So I'm just using my flexible ruler here, which is nice. So if I go 6 inches from there, I will end up one there, and 6 inches from there puts me right near the end there. So I can just run one across there. I don't know if that's not enough or if that's too much, but that's what I'm going to go with right now. Every 6 inches there'll be a 3/16 silicone bronze carriage bolt right through. Now I may have to move this one back a little bit, and maybe I'll evenly space these out at 5. The only reason being is a lot of this top surface area will get planed down to the level of the keel itself. What shall we do? What shall we do? Suppose one could measure the distance between first and last and divide by an even number. Let's try that method. 18, well, we know 18, 24, 30, we're at 36. But I would like this bolt to move back because this will get shaved down to the height here somewhat, something like this through there. So I don't want that bolt to be going through basically nothing. I would want it back here. So let's start, first one being right here. So that then becomes 30, we'll say 33 by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spaces. So a 3/16 silicone bronze carriage bolt through there. It's going to be more than long enough, and probably too long because I'll be countersinking it, but I can cut off those as needed. The next size down that I have is, this is 4 inches. Next size down is 2 inches, which will not be long enough. So that's what we're shooting for, is to get these carriage bolts through, countersunk, counterbored, plugged on the end after shaping. How deep to go? That will be the question, because we're going to taper this down, so I need to go in pretty deep, probably ½ an inch in. So we'll set the drill, countersink, counterboard to ½ an inch. I'm going to start out with a shorter drill because it'll be easier to get it straight than with a long one that is very easy to go off, but I'm going to need to switch over to the longer drill to punch my way all the way through. So here we go. There's no turning back now. Okay, I've switched back to my shorter drill and added the counter bore. So I have taken the hand power planer to this, being very careful not to get the edges of the blades cutting into the planking. And now I can just do a bit of cleanup with my block plane. Now I still have to take it off the boat, so to do any finishing, shaping off the boat will be a little bit easier. Last piece of the center line to go on is the outside stem. So we're just going to add our polysulfide bedding compound here. That should be enough. Now I don't exactly want the outside stem glued to the inside stem past this point here, because this outside or inside stem will be cut off and only the outside stem extends above the shear line. Just to make sure we don't get any on there, I can stick some masking tape over there. masking tape should come off. Suppose I could have cut this off before installing the outside stem, but I'm not really sure of the profile to cut that on yet until I roll this over and then trim off the inside stem. Alright, time to put the bolts back in. So a good sign is the amount of sealant that has been squeezing out on both sides, and it's coming right through to the nuts on the inside. So just going to do a quick cleanup and peel off the tape, and that's it for today. Following the installation of the Skag, the keel and the outer stem, I have plugged all the holes with some wood plugs. I have sanded the whole hull nice and smooth just by hand to get rid of any scratches and marks, wet it down, have a look at it, and I plan to put a couple of coats of varnish on here before moving on to finally rolling this hull over. So thank you very much for watching. Next episode, the boat will be right side up. Bye for now.